Urban Ed Praxis. For this conversation, we're going to be focusing on the praxis of literacy, is play, is justice, decentering whiteness with children's books. And we have an amazing panel for you all tonight. And I'm joined here with Elisa Algava, and I'm Lisa Aguilar, for those of you who may be new. And we're super happy to bring everyone together, for as we close out the school year and think about the next year of panels. So some quick announcements. Are we doing announcements in the beginning, Elisa, or at the end? It'll be quick. Give to the Social Justice Students Fund. I'll plug it in at the end. We'll put in the link later. But why don't we go ahead and get started, because we have amazing people. We want to give them all the time to talk, because that's what we're here for. And they're going to introduce themselves, and we will pop in their bios in the chat for you all to peruse at your own timing. But we're going to begin with, I'm kicking it off to, I can't see my script. Is Cecilia kicking it off, or Cecilia's closing it?
I'm closing. Oh,
you're closing.
Okay, I'm opening it too. So my name is Cecilia Espinosa. I teach at Lehman College, and I'm very passionate about children's literature. So I'm so excited and honored to be here sharing sort of our experiences with you and among each other too. We don't always have an opportunity to be together. So I have a question for everyone on the panel. Can you tell me what is one children's or young adult book that you're reading now? And what is your favorite book and why? And maybe we can start with Carla.
Sure, hey everyone.
And then Carla, you can send it to someone else?
Yes, Carla España here. I am currently 7th, 8th grade English teacher and dean at an independent school in New York. Transitioning this year to the Department of Puerto Rican and Latino Studies, and at Brooklyn College, going back to my CUNY roots. I'm so excited, yay! I'm currently not only surrounded in my office at work and in my room here with a bunch of middle grade and YA books over here. So I love it, because one of my students today said, your office feels so cozy. And I was like, great, because all I got is like middle grade books, at school. This is great. I just finished Witchlings by Kahdeidra Ortega, and it's full of magic and humor. Like with kids, sometimes if you watch like kid movies, but they throw those lines in that are for the adults that are watching with the kids. That's what this book feels. It's such great middle grade writing, and Kahdeidra Ortega wrote Ghost Squad, and I kept quoting it in like every workshop and webinar that I was doing with Luz in the past 2 years on Zoom. And now it's Witchlings. I thought nothing could top Ghost Squad, but Witchlings is like a book for my heart, and I love every single character, and I need this on the screen. So recommend it. And I'll pass it on to, go ahead, Kahdeidra.
Hi, thank you, Carla. My name is Kahdeidra Martin, and I'm currently a lecturer of writing and rhetoric at Stanford University. I teach very cute first-year students, and they're just amazing. And I am not currently reading a children's or YA book, but my favorite book in the whole wide world is a book of YA, and it's called The Friends by Rosa Guy. So this is a book, it was, it's fantastic. It was one of the first books, and still one of the only ones that I've seen to really explore this intimate relationship between a Caribbean American and African American young woman. And that was basically my experience growing up. So I saw myself reflected in both of the characters and both of the protagonists. So it remains my favorite book, and I hope to one day contribute to writing more YA books myself. Yeah. So maybe I will pass it to Laura.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Laura Ascenzi-Moreno, and I am at Brooklyn College, City University of New York, in the Childhood Bilingual and Special Education Department. And I'm the coordinator of the bilingual program. Hi, Dean Chandler. I'm so glad you're here. And I love the program. The students are amazing. And I'm so so deeply excited that Carla's coming on because we share our program together. And I think for the, we're going to really collaborate in a way that maybe we haven't been able to before between departments. So I'm super excited. So I brought 2 books and I'm going to be really fast. The first book is I read this book as a parent. So I have an 11-year-old son and who loves sports. And this is Playbook by Kwame Alexander. And I love this book because it really speaks to the heart of boys and girls who love sports. And it's really about like believing in yourself, understanding that struggle is natural. And so I love it. And Kwame Alexander features these beautiful stories of, I think, eclectic sports people like Wilma Rudolph, who had polio. And I mean, it's just so fantastic. I was reading it like, oh my God, this is great. And it's poetic and beautiful. So he just makes the inner life of people who love sports to be so radiant. I loved the book. And then I always have to feature this book. Everywhere I go, I carry it with me. This is a book I read to everybody. In fact, if I ever have a house guest, even if they're not in education, I'm like, read this book. So I read it to my students. I give it to everyone I can possibly give to. It's by Are Morales, who is Tatiana's student as well. And it's about her life coming to us and her experience as a dreamer. I am going to call on Luz.
Thank you so much. And by the way, Areli was my student as well, so I'm going to claim her at Brooklyn College. So I'm so proud of her. Hi, everybody. Luz Yadira Herrera, and I'm an assistant professor of bilingual education at California State University, Channel Islands. So I don't know. I think I might be the only one. No, actually, no. Kahdeidra, you're on the West Coast too. I don't know if you're on the West Coast still, Tatiana, on the Southern West Coast. No, okay, you're back on the East Coast. Oh, you are in Mazatlan.
Atlanta.
Oh, that's amazing. So cool. Well, so I'm reading, I guess 2 right now. So one with my son. It's part of the Unicorn Rescue Society book series, and I'm reading the Sasquatch and the Muckleshoot. So this is a co-authored book with an Indigenous author, and the Unicorn Rescue Society series is sort of one author with a co-author that sort of features like different cultural, stories, folklore. And so we're reading the Sasquatch and the Muckleshoot story right now with my son, Remy. He's 8 years old. And for myself, I'm actually reading the first book in the Brujas of Brooklyn, or the Brooklyn Brujas series by Zoraida Cordova. And it's called Labyrinth Lost. And Zoraida Cordova is a Ecuadorian American author, actually, like our dear Cecilia here. So it's really cool. It's one of the first, it's actually the first book that I read by this author, but I really like just the fantasy genre in general. And I love this story so far. It's just centered like queer, Latinx characters, and just in a fantasy world. So I love it. Yeah, so
thank you.
Go
ahead and share mine before we move on.
Yeah.
So mine is called Borders, and it's by Thomas King. It's one I'm rereading now. And it's a book that really challenges the absurdity of borders. The characters are Blackfoot, and they are, they refuse to acknowledge that they are American or Canadian. It's a very powerful story. And then my very favorite book is Martha Big and Small. And this is a book that in appearance, it could be very simple, just about sizes, but with depth, if you look at it carefully, it's really about a child who is an author. She's bilingual and she translates languages. So in very few pages, she has everything, and she has copper skin. So a book that tends to be overlooked, but very powerful. So Laura, you're going to take us to the next question.
Actually, before Laura begins, she and I have been texting each other because as is tradition, I tend to always mess up and I forget to do one thing in the opening or the closing. And I could, I had to do that with the last one as well. I completely forgot to share our essential question for the evening, which I think with everyone sharing their books, we might have a clue. But today we're going to focus the panel discussion on in what ways do children's books help us as educators to decenter whiteness in our work with teachers, children, and families. And so thinking about that as our panelists shared today, their thoughts in the different arenas that they work with, whether it's directly with children, directly with pre-service teachers, directly with families, all of the above, et cetera. And with that, we will start with Laura. Thank you, Laura, for letting me correct that.
Of course, it's like a conversation at dinner. I feel like this conversation should be very small. But the first question emerges from practice. So I have teacher education students who, after being exposed to a variety of diverse texts that I bring in, they still go to the text that they've read as a child for their final projects. And I've tried a lot of different things, like giving them a list for them to choose from. But Luz, how do you think teacher educators can instill not only a diverse texts, but help them with the skills and eagerness to seek them out? So how do we go from pushing our students to pick books that decenter whiteness to having them push themselves to do that?
Well, I'm definitely very intentional with my in my teacher education classrooms. I also am a teacher educator, and I have assignments that specifically, focus on developing a children's library collection that is culturally and linguistically sustaining. But I do that because every single class session, we actually start with a read aloud, usually from a picture book. And it is a book that I would consider to be culturally sustaining to the students that most of my students will eventually teach or are teaching in some capacity already. And we focus on a few focal questions before we begin, sort of the reading, and then sort of to focus on, and it's the same 3 questions for every single read aloud. The first question, which is really stemming from the work that Carla and I have been doing, is really to think about what are the themes, what are the topics that emerge from this text, right? How do authors use language to tell the story, right? How does the dynamic language use? Because all of these books usually that I share with students feature translanguaging because they also have to be linguistically sustaining. I ask students to reflect on how the author uses language for what purpose, what it does for the storytelling, right? And finally, how can we use this in a space of learning? And so every single time we read aloud, we focus on those 3 questions to reflect on, to discuss in small groups. And so we do that every single session. And so one very intentional assignment is for them to actually create their own library collection around one topic of their choice, right? They have to choose between 5 and 10 children's books, YA or middle grade books that they want under that topic. Create a sort of guided questions for the overarching theme or topic, and any other kind of resources they want to include, but they have to be, it does have to be specifically books that are culturally sustaining, linguistically sustaining, so they have those clear guidelines. And then they use those books to sort of take it a little bit step further. So most of the time, the final project is going to be a mini unit or a sequence of lessons. And so it has to be based on children's literature. So I kind of make everything around children's literature sort of like the star of everything. And from there, we talk about like the topics that matter, right? And then how we teach like different things that we want to sort of teach, but really focusing on like the broader takeaways, the larger meaning, right? Through the themes that we're focusing on. Yeah, so that's one way to do it.
Thank you.
Yes.
I mean, it's amazing to see how layered you do it, like throughout the semester.
Thank you. It's a work in progress, and I always try to just, you know, maybe switch things around. And I like for them to share each other's library collection so that they can get ideas as well as their lesson planning, like together, so that they can get ideas from each other. Because it is important that they get a chance, you know, everybody gets a chance to share and learn. And at the very end, actually, we all sort of share in one folder all of our library collections, so that you have, you know, 25 of these libraries centered on around a specific topic or theme.
And can I just add that, Luz, when you were saying this being a work in progress, it reminded me of also an approach in teacher ed of saying that the books that we select for our lessons or to engage students in whichever different type of activities, can also reflect a counter narrative to the dominant ones that were very harmful to our own upbringing, whether it's like family in conversations, whether it's in school. So correcting those harmful narratives. So I know that when I remember I was at Hunter, I had students do this type of project similar to Luz, but they had to first, we did a lot of work on like ideologies around us, specifically around language. And it raised a lot of narratives from their own lives that were tied to other aspects. So language being tied to other aspects of identity and culture. And that led to, okay, now that we realized there was a lot of anti-Blackness in our families or in our books that we got in school, or there was a lot of just push for English and nothing related to our bilingualism, multilingualism, then how do we now go find books that have a different narrative so that we don't continue that cycle? So we're not going to be that teacher that's like, oh, the Spanish you speak, it has to be the Spanish that is from Spain, because that's what my teachers told me. So I'm going to do the same thing. So it's a lot of unpacking those harmful narratives. We do that work in order to say, now the books that we select we have to do better. Like, we're not going to be a part of that cycle for the children in our lives. And that's constant. So yes, we still have to work on that.
Thank you so much, Carla. Should we move on to the next question?
Sure.
So the next question, actually, I'm going to ask Kahdeidra. Kahdeidra, what does decentering whiteness mean or look like in your literacies work with children, young adults, and families?
Thank you for that question, Luz. And I'm going to pick up actually on what you and what Carla are talking about. So for me, decentering whiteness really means we're centering students, right? So we're decentering a kind of broad theory and idea of what education should be, right? And who it should serve. And where we want students to go and how we want to train them to be like, right? And we're focusing on uplifting and sustaining who students are, right? So with that said, I'm really focused on, having my, when I taught literacy to teacher education candidates, is really thinking about, okay, what does student-centered mean? Student-centered pedagogy is what our students are experiencing. Right. So we've got to do our work to process, right, our own traumas and our own biases and, our own perspectives. That's a part of this work. Right. But we've really got to zone in and focus on, what are the students experiencing? Right. Who are they? And so what I find is that for many, we need more tools to understand who our students are and who the neighborhoods are. Right. Who are the communities in this neighborhood where we teach? Who are the communities? Like, what are those communities like where our students come from? And so for many teachers, we don't have a good enough understanding of that. So one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is imparting to students the importance of the hyperlocal context. Right? Because when we try to do this DE&I work, right, a lot of times we're still thinking about it on a very broad level. And we still have these kind of stock ideas, right, of racial diversity, right? But what it means to be Black in Flatbush, Brooklyn is going to be very different even than what it means to be Black in the Bronx and what it means to be Black in the Bay Area. right? So when we're thinking that we want to, that we want to have culturally relevant and culturally sustaining, education for our students, we've got to know who they really, really are, right? At a very specific level. We've got to know, what those discourses are, what those deficit narratives are that are specific to that environment. Right? So like, what's the relation? If I'm teaching in the Bay Area, I've got to know, what's this relationship like, among these minoritized communities in this area. I've got to know what those discourses are. I've got to know, how colorism is working. How is colorism working among these kids from the Pacific Islands, right? Who, and these students, who are, from, Central America, and these African American students, like, how are they engaging? These are things that I need to know that the textbooks haven't caught up with yet. So the only way for me to know it is from me really being in the community, from me talking to community members, from me talking to students, from my asking students, hey, there's an activity that I actually did as a part of my dissertation, which I also am starting to like introduce with students, is, asking them, what are the different communities that you're a part of? Have it be open-ended and see what they tell you. Right. And what I was shocked by was that for many of my participants, it was very specific. They were very specific to the borough. They were very specific to kind of being a part of these very specific communities that, that's important to them, but you wouldn't know it. Right. So starting there, having something be open-ended and having students like create like a collage, right, that reflects their different identities and their different communities that they are a part of visually. And then you ask them about it. Explain this more to me. What does this mean? I had students who were high school students who had pictures of, who had pictures of a stall of a fruit market, right? Fruit and vegetables, because that reminded them of being from the Caribbean, right? And that reminded them on the weekends where their parents went to, to buy their fresh fruit and vegetables in this particular neighborhood, right? And that they traveled to do that. So these are the types of things that, the types of activities that we need to have, with our youth to really understand who they are. And then once we have this idea, right, then again, like Carla said, we've got to be intentional about countering these deficit narratives. Right. So once I kind of catch wind that, okay, there's something going down, there's something going with colorism here, there's something going down with like model minorities, status among these students, I've got to intentionally counter that. I've got to intentionally choose texts that show all of my students that you are perfect just the way that you are beautiful, you are valuable. I've got to do that work if I'm their, if I'm their teacher, if I'm a caring adult in their lives. And so I think, those are just some of the ways that I, decentering whiteness, looks to me like, okay, I'm not going to start with any preconceived notions of who my students are, but I'm going to go to them directly and find out, who they say they are. And I'm going to find out what's really going on in the communities where they live, and then building on that, building curricula around that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And so now back to Carla now. So, now we're in May, and of course, we may have some students who are already, I've heard stories of students already emailing teachers asking for the syllabus for the fall, right? And so we're going to think about our lesson planning already, many of us. And so I want to ask you, now as we think about next year, we think about, prepping for our syllabi for the fall, how do you go about sourcing books for your classroom libraries and for your syllabi? How do you go about doing that in advance?
Okay, so I'll give you two different examples from the teacher ed, and also then for books for kids in different ways. So first, in the teacher ed, I loved a process that I had at Bank Street College. We all got involved, the staff, in an inventory of a syllabus from our class. So we took one syllabus from a class. We came into meetings. This was a process across a few months, and it was an inquiry as to what does this syllabus say about what voices we value, what experiences we want students to have, not only just the text that we are reading and who the authors are, but the types of teaching like activities we're doing with those texts. So we color coded when it was like, do we have Black voices represented, Indigenous voices represented? Do we have queer voices represented? Is it our assignments? Are assignments only pen to paper or typing? Is it always asking them to like, show me what you learned in a report or in an essay? Or so we did all of that. And then we had our findings. And that process was so helpful because then we applied it to our other courses. And so I highly recommend doing that with colleagues and saying, let me do a little inventory of what's represented here. And it says a lot about where a course has come from and the voices that have been in syllabus for one course for across time, and what's missing and maybe new voices, right? So we realized that for us, a lot of the representation wasn't so much that we were lacking across different groups, it was also in types. So we said we need to go more to multimodal types of assignments and text. So we had more podcasts and we had spoken word poetry, and we had different types of texts that students can engage with, because it's not only journal articles that we should be reading, but we should be engaging with the world in different ways. So that was super helpful. And that's where I always start. I start with what exists now, and then what are the voices missing? And with the voices and the types of assignments that are missing, then I go to my experts, and we're going to give some recommendations in later on, but I love following all of you as experts and then recommending the readings that you've authored. So thank you everyone who's here, because that makes my job easier. But also I follow a lot of authors and publishers on social media, and I'm in constant communication with them to find out what's like the next thing that they're working on. So that's helped me bring either advanced reader copies to the classroom or bring authors. So I've had my modern languages and literature course in children's literature in Spanish at Brooklyn College a year or two ago. I had David Bowles visit, Emma Otegui visited, Velázquez, who is an illustrator and author, and so I had all these children's literature authors and illustrators visit my course that had teachers from Laura's program and that had students who were just practicing their Spanish. So that was for me like a way to get out of my box of like, oh, I will just get a book and read it to you, and then we'll engage with it. And well, no, I actually need you to hear from these authors and illustrators. So it was beautiful. And then the other example I just wanted to give real quick with the 7th and 8th grades, because I've been in it this year, I've been really thinking about who are the people, and we're going to get to this question, like that are making decisions of making sure that children have access to books. And because we're in a time where a lot of access is being denied for certain types of books, making sure that in my teacher ed programs, I give the tools and the language to my teachers to know how to navigate those conversations at their schools. So for example, the school where I'm at, there's a book committee that's made up of the counselor, the principal, the librarian, and the teacher who recommends a book. And the conversation is around, is there anything in the book that might need more support from somebody outside than the teacher, because the topic might be too heavy for a child to process on their own if they're reading it by themselves, or if it's a class read and they need a counselor to help them with that. So I understand that type of like support thinking, oh, we want adults to be there for kids. But then also I'm thinking of what's missing and when their access has been denied for kids. So like I know queer lit is a big point of contention in my current middle school. And they say, oh, when they get to high school, they can pick the seminar in 11th grade and they can take that in 11th grade, but we're not going to assign that book in 7th or 8th grade. So if you're not going to assign it, then where are students going to get to be able to engage with that? And so finding ways, we've done book clubs, we've done features of anthologies have helped me a lot, because with anthologies like flying lessons, although We Need Diverse Books anthologies are for middle grade, you have so many beautiful different authors. And what I did, because, okay, the anthology was approved for the school, well, I'm going to have you pick one author that you're going to become an expert on. You're going to look at this, get to know this author, do your presentations on this author. And it was wonderful. We had so many great conversations about why these authors are writing these stories. So anthologies has been my subversive way to make sure I get those conversations to happen when other books don't get recommended. So then they did the presentations on the authors, and I was like, hey, here are other books that these authors have written. Bam. And then my last thing I'll say about that was poetry. So I had a poetry unit. They're like, oh, you can use like different types of poems. And I was like, oh, show me what you've done. What do you think was on the list? I had Robert Frost. That's what came to me. And I was like, oh, all right. So I'm gonna bring in The Moon Within. And we're gonna have a little book club here, and you choose. This is choice, right? And you're just gonna look at the first few pages. If you like it, you keep reading. And we're gonna look at a non-binary character here. We're gonna look at a girl who gets a period here, and we're gonna look at One Last Word, and look at poets from the Harlem Renaissance, and poetry through novels and verse, and books by Nikki Grimes. You can never go wrong with books by Nikki Grimes. It was my way to make sure that I had a lot of access for those kids who, based on the curriculum that was on a website or was given before, they did not have access to that. So I can talk all day about this, but I'm gonna pause because that was a lot. So I will just move to the next question, to Laura. How do we, ooh, this is tough, given a current New York Times article that just came out. How do we navigate the current shift back towards phonics instruction and still center justice and our students' funds of knowledge and literacies as we teach reading and reading life? Like, what's your response to all of this?
I think it's such a big thing lately because it's polarized. I feel like it mirrors the current political climate. So in the current political climate, we've set up like we've set up different camps, and those camps are at war with each other. And for some reason now we've set that up in reading as well. And I've never felt the tension as much as now, which, I mean, I've been an educator for the past 25 years almost, and I feel it so strongly now. Because if you look at the science of reading literature, what they're saying is experimental studies are the gold standard for understanding reading. And as a reading researcher, and among my friends here who are all literacy researchers, we understand that reading is extremely diverse and complex and can only be understood by different types of studies. It's not only quantitative experimental studies that's going to tell us how children learn to read, because what we've been discussing are texts that touch your heart, that change your thinking, that give voice to yourself, that help you envision yourself in the future, that justify who you are now. And that's not going to happen only through prescribed reading instruction. And the whole idea, so yesterday in the New York Times, there was this article which really vilified Lucy Calkins. And, you know, I'm not a super huge fan of Lucy Calkins because I'm a huge fan of Donald Graves. This is like a genealogy. And I feel like she really didn't attribute who he was and lots of issues. But basically they were placing the blame on her and saying that she ruined thousands of lives through the Teachers College Reading and Writing Project. And again, I think this is a mirror of the politics and vilifying academics, saying that she was out of touch with reading research and she should have known that. What we do know is that reading is something that takes a whole lifespan. So equating phonics or decoding with reading is so simplistic. So we can't just say that phonics is reading. Phonics is decoding. And, you know, it's the first step in becoming a reader. And definitely, I don't think anyone on this panel would argue that learning letters and sounds is important. Of course it is, but it really is the first step. And I think we really need more complex models of reading that take into account cultural and cultural factors, social factors, and identity. I'm going to off what Kahdeidra said. In order to teach readers, we need to understand who they are, who they yearn to be, what they want in their lives. And that also includes phonics and phonemic awareness instruction. You know, we can't get into this situation where we're mandated to do phonics with children who don't even speak, like who don't know the sounds because the sounds are so different from like their own language. So we need to have teachers who are experts, who understand how to pull together the cultural resources and identities as students in phonics instruction too. We can't make phonics instruction seem like a gold standard, one size fit all type instruction, because it's not, and it's not going to be the answer. So in answering your question, Carla, I mean, I could also talk about this forever because, you know, as someone who started off in early childhood, I taught pre-KK first and second. My whole life was teaching children to be readers, and to learn to read is part of that. But to be a reader is much bigger than that. And it's connected to your identity as a person. And I think that's the way we decenter whiteness within thinking about decoding and reading instruction. We have to be really like adamant that reading is not phonics, that phonics is important. It's, you know, but it's not reading, it is decoding. I know that probably Cecilia has something to say about this too. I mean, but no, okay. So let me see. The next one is for Cecilia. So this question is about book bans. I'm so sorry. What do you think is the biggest challenge teachers face at this moment with regards to decentering whiteness in children's literature? What do you think they can do to creatively and sometimes subversively disrupt it?
So I work with prospective teachers, many of them bilingual teachers. Thank you, Laura. And as I was hearing you talk, I was thinking about how different it would be if we ask a different question about reading. And you were talking about that, and it made me think of a question around, in Spanish, we have the word letrado versus being alfabetizado. So what would it mean if we really thought about, you know, sort of thinking about what it means to be a reader, a critical reader in this time when we're all exposed to fake news, we're exposed to banning of books, you know, it's just everything. So as we hear, I think this sort of somebody trying to create a narrative that it is about phonics versus Lucy Calkin's work. They're just creating a new sort of narrative for us. And I think that we need to get underneath all of that and ask deeper questions and think about, you know, what is it that how is it that we want to create those spaces? So with that in mind, I work in the Bronx, and often the students that I have in my biliteracy course have come from scripted curriculum. And many of them, when we did a survey with the librarian at Lehman, we found out that they knew Dr. Seuss and Eric Carle. And these were diverse students, right? Very diverse students. We decided that one of the ways that we were going to sort of shift that and offer them counter narratives was to write grants and transform the library at Lehman College so that they could see really a wide variety of reflections of children's books. I think that that big challenge of not always having had experiences to participate in rich conversations about books is an issue. At school, they have those rich conversations certainly at home, but at schools, the experiences that they get are comprehension questions, are maybe sort of surface level. So how do we create spaces for prospective teachers, for classroom teachers to engage in conversations about books where they can explore character development, setting, where they can explore the elements of literature? If literature is really the illumination of life, how do we create those spaces? You know, I think it has to, those invitations to engage in conversations about books have to be at all levels. And I think that then we could create some ripple effects. I think that they also need to know, for example, about awards of books and how do we occupy those spaces about award books, right? So, you know, that we need to be in those spaces and that our students need to be in those spaces so that we can transform who's getting those awards. I think I try to, for example, in terms of being subversive, also thinking about how the publishing industry works and why is it that we're getting, you know, sort of we have to work so hard at getting the books that we need in the classrooms, right? So that the students need to understand at different levels, sort of what is happening. And then ultimately, I think that teachers who are readers of children's books bring the joy of reading to the classrooms and that criticality. So with that in mind, And because we're coming to a
Cecilia.
time we're asking questions. Yes.
There was a question in the chat for you from Kahdeidra. If you can just
Kahdeidra.
explain letrado and alfabetización and what are the differences?
So alfabetización is usually what traditionally has been done from a government perspective in Latin America to what I would call the masses, but I think here too, right? So you might become alfabetizado, so you can sign your name, right? So you can attend to classrooms where you repeat answers that the teacher already knows the answer for, right? So you're not really engaging in critical thinking and thinking about society. And then letrado is, I would say, somebody who can enter the world of story, for example, can talk about books, can talk critically about books, knows authors, has relationships with authors, knows that literature is a reflection of life, but it can also be what offers us possibilities in times of fear or danger or sort of transition. So all the possibilities that literature offers, and sometimes we say now that people are doing other things and they're no longer readers. And I think that we need to really sort of help them sort of think about what it would mean, if we're not reading, if we're not engaging and becoming places where reading and criticality really happens. And children's books are just wonderful, but I think how we engage with them matters.
Thank you, Cecilia. You taught me something new.
Thank you.
I see a parallel there with, I think, how the word lettered is used. When you say someone is lettered, in American English. Thank you.
I just wanted to say one quick thing. What I'm seeing in a lot of this backlash is this idea that, especially with the phonics thing, is that children of color need basic needs, like their basic needs met. So they need decoding and they need phonics really fast, not to fall behind, instead of a rich and quality diet of literature. So I'm thinking about that throughout all of our conversations. I mean, I'm just thinking about it with regards to our conversation about phonics, but also, before we had the conversation, Carla was talking about at her school, I hope this is okay to say, that they were like, oh, you have to read X book, not this book. And it's also this whole narrative of just give the basic needs, just enough to be able to pass a test, not something to nourish your soul. And
well, you asked that question, right? And I wrote that down. What does it mean to be a critical reader in these times? Who asked that? I just wrote it down. I circled it. And I know that you would get different answers from different students at my school. One would say, to be not a critical, but they said to be a reader, it means you make sure you pass your pop quizzes about the names of the characters and the setting of the book and basic recall facts, because they get those pop quizzes. But what I'm saying is what is it in that question of being a critical reader in these times, a critical reader of when you see world events, when you see what's happening in our country, when you are also, you're also engaging with texts and different themes and characters. I need you, I brought in literary theory to my class, and we had a post-colonial lens on Lord of the Flies, because if the school wants you to read Lord of the Flies, we're going to apply a different lens to it and bring that in. But that was not what everyone else is doing their pop quizzes on, basic recall facts and cutesy little dioramas and I don't know, activities that they do on that book. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can I just chime in quickly on that last point?
Yes.
As someone who has one foot in academia trying to finish my own doctoral studies and one foot in a school right now as an administrator, it's the tension that I'm seeing now. And Deb, I think you were getting at that, or you added in the chat, it requires balance, right? I think we're ping-ponging from one extreme to the other, where the needs of, our students, and the literacy needs, right? In order for our students to enjoy reading, they need the basic tools, right? And oftentimes in schools where our students need them the most, we don't have teachers who are as well prepared to know exactly what to do to bring that beautiful marriage together between, okay, these are the tools you need to read the word so that you can then read the world, right? Like if we go back to Paulo Freire. And so I think that is the tension, right? How do we become how do we create intentional schools that say, yes, both can live here, right? Yes, we know that in order for our children, our students to be able to enjoy reading and to become critical readers, they need to have these skill sets, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? We all have the skill sets, which is why we on this panel and on this Zoom call are able to read. Then how do we ensure that all of our students in schools in the South Bronx, you know, have those tools solidly and are having teachers that know how to get them, you know, build and develop those skill sets without killing what it means to love reading and what it means to read critically, and how do we bring in, right, these ideas of identity and culture, and create a reading culture and a reading life that emanates from the school, right, and can travel with them beyond. So I think it's that balance and thinking about, well, which schools are able to strike the balance and which schools don't, and why are there some schools that don't have that dual intentionality? So I just wanted to add that piece in there.
Can I jump in for a second too? I am early on, I was like, I'm so happy. It's like all my worlds are converging. Well, not all, but a bunch of them. And I don't know, Shayla Omatola, are you still out there? I don't want to put you on. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I was chatting here with someone on the panel, and we're curious because you guys are right on the ground. Shayla and Omatola both worked in early childhood programs, coaching teachers of 3 and 4 year olds. And someone was asking, what are your thoughts on the science of reading and what's happening up in the world of policy and research and down on the ground where we live and learn and love children? I don't know if you, not to put you on the spot, I just put you on the spot. But if you don't want to answer, don't worry.
No, I think it's great. We are constantly having that conversation, especially now. We know our chancellor, he's leaning towards literacy. And so I think Shayla may have the same experience. Teachers are struggling with trying to have the pre-K students ready for kindergarten, and they are missing the mark when it comes to just letting them be. So they are doing things that may not be developmentally appropriate, right? So instead of allowing them to enjoy storytelling and playing and all those things that in itself develops literacy, they focus on trying to the letter of the week, memorizing things, you know, and there's some short-term, they can see some short-term success, right? The kids are, you know, they can see these short-term successes because kids can memorize things, right? But in the long term, it doesn't really help. And I think just trying to help them to understand childhood development and how they develop and how they learn through play, I think that's something that, you know, I'm trying to do towards the end of the school year and helping them to see that it's a highly stressful time for them. So we're also giving grace, right? That's so important to give grace, but also understanding that literacy is not something you can just force and have kids memorize through, you know, things that are not necessarily developmentally appropriate.
Thank you, Matola. Oh, It breaks my heart. And I, to the teachers that I work with, both in the classes, but also in the schools that I go to, we talk a lot about the power of oral language and family stories, for example, and how there's so much potential there to develop literacy. And I know that what's happening is sort of like a narrative is being created, right? A narrative of deficit. Why Johnny Can't Read was created several decades ago, right? That narrative is sort of a crisis. So I think that we also need to understand what they're doing with us in that sense. But we have many tools, right? We have nursery rhymes. And certainly from singing a nursery rhyme and then looking at a pattern or rhyming words, they can certainly develop those phonemic awareness that they need. And that's probably exactly why nursery rhymes were invented. They're wonderful, predictable books. There's great possibilities with drama. So I think that something else that we need to do is we need to be really clear about how is it that these other experiences help to develop literacy and biliteracies, right? That I think that we need to have the argument because of our experiences ready and help the teachers see what is it that the children are missing if they're getting letters in isolation versus if the whole child can participate. And by whole child, I mean the whole body, right? Dancing and singing and dramatizing and bringing family stories and doing all of that. And painting and you name it. And they don't need to have, expensive costumes or anything. They can just dramatize right there. And that's, I think, is in all those sort of small moments is where literacy develops. And those are the kindergartners that are ready for kindergarten. That's what they have been doing. And they look naturally smart. And they have been doing that. I don't think parents pay a lot of money in the higher socioeconomic circumstances for a pre-K that teaches letters. So I think we need to ask big questions about what literacy is and literacies are.
I just want to just to jump in for a second and to say something that actually adds to what Cecilia is saying, and something that Laura mentioned as well, is that we really need more people involved in phonics instruction. So I'm actually really interested in it. I took a course on systematic phonics instruction, and I said, why isn't this more common knowledge? Why don't more people know about it? Because if we did, right, then we could have more people thinking about, okay, how can we make this culturally sustaining, right? How can we make this more engaging? And so I think that I really want to encourage, all of us to think about kind of jumping in, and seeing, and because we have our lived experience, right, that many of the people who are driving, right, this more traditional reading instruction don't have. Right. So we can say, well, how can we, but they don't have the competence that we have. Right. So I think what it really takes is, is more of us kind of, getting in the ring and saying, this is what we're going to develop. Like, how can we develop? So that's one of my big inquiry questions is how can I develop decolonial, culturally sustaining word study? Like, that's literally one of my research questions, right? And using game-based learning, right? And looking, like, I'm all over that. And I would love to engage, I'd love to partner with you all, if you're interested in it, or anybody who's watching, because it's fun. It's fun, it's joyful, it's fun. And we can certainly center the languaging of our communities in doing that. Right. But again, these people who are trained traditionally, they don't know how to do that. But we could. I think we need to create something different. It's going to take us creating something different to do that.
And as I'm looking at the chat, I'm reminded that we want to make sure we have audience members either unmute. Deb, I see your hand up. So as soon as I'm done, you'll go first, but either unmute or just type in your question in the chat. Go ahead, Deb.
I was thinking about my area has been, adolescents, young adolescents, so middle school to high school, and thinking about the power of kids that never had that formal kind of direct instruction and phonemic awareness and everything, and how we can shift. I was like, Dr. Martin, I was so, it kind of popped at me, you know, I'm constantly trying to draw down from the power of some of these talented rappers that kind of you can use to get them re-involved in thinking about rhythm and rhyme. And, you know, when early childhood people were just talking about, you know, nursery rhymes and everything, I'm on the other end of the spectrum thinking about what rappers are kind of bringing to the table for us to use to kind of springboard into this, you know, into this conversation. And I'm just like so excited about the possibilities. So it's keeping our, you know, because reading does not, I think when, you know, I've been around maybe too long. Cecilia, I know you're shaking your head. I've been around a long time, but I went through all the reading wars and everything else, and it was like disastrous. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about equity and access, our kids, many of our kids do not learn by osmosis. So we have to be more direct in giving them a balance of both. The love for the word, the story, you know, hearing it, but also the desire to be able to, I think, Laura, you said about decoding it. You know, they have the power to decode words when if they can't use it in context or whatever. So it's very complicated, but I think we have enough research now after many, many years of how to balance it all out. And I think we owe that to the next generation of educators that we're preparing.
While the other questions are coming in, I'll just give an example of what that looks like on the ground from when I was teaching my sixth graders. And I had a lot of newcomers and students who are at different parts on their bilingualism spectrum there. And they had a continuum. They had this, the Words Their Way curriculum that a lot of schools were using. So we know, Kahdeidra, yeah, you can. And so I got to know the system of like when you introduce the sort of the words, and then they had these like cutesy little activities that looked to me like, oh, that's age appropriate for like the kindergarten level, the first grade level, but I'm with sixth graders. But I understand that my school is like, well, you need to also help them with their letter name recognition and within word vowels and all this good stuff. But I had to modify and say, I'm not going to use that little book that comes with like nursery rhymes or whatever and poems because that wouldn't be age appropriate and engaging for my students. So I started using a lot of music, and it was so much fun. So I applied the same like protocol. So I'm down, Kahdeidra, for like whatever you're envisioning. I had like little games, but it was always started with a song, and every group had it was all differentiated. I had different groups, different songs coming, like requested that I asked them to share with me. I mean, with the songs, we talked about the content of the songs, and then we also talked about like the sounds that the letters are making together. And then we were also reading books together. Like we read The Color of My Words, El Color de Mis Palabras in Spanish. We read it in English, and we were talking about the power of writing. It's a book by Lynn Joseph, a classic on that takes place in the Dominican Republic, and the power of writing. So there were all these components to, I'm going to read a book together with my students. I had a picture book every day I read with sixth graders. Every single day there was a picture book, just because this is quick, it helps us get through it, and it helps us as a community talk about these issues. There was a novel we got through together across a few weeks, and we had these activities around songs. So, and that was what my school encouraged. Like there was never like you're doing either or, it was we're doing everything we need to do to make sure students grow. And I'm thankful for really strong leadership in my, that was at Don Pedro Aviso Campo School in Harlem. So I just wanted to share that example of what it looks like.
Thank you for that. Because I think the more examples help to really make it come alive, what the possibilities are. And Tatiana, I see you have your hand up, so we'll go ahead and turn to you.
Yes, thank you. It's so wonderful seeing all of you come together and bring your love and passion for children's literature. I just want to start out with saying I love children's books. I love picture books. And I think Carla kind of read my mind when she said, like, I read pictures books with middle school kids. So I want to take that up a notch. Like, how do you bring in picture books with high school kids in a way that is not disrespectful to them, that is culturally sustaining, that is decentering whiteness, all of that? Because like who doesn't love a good picture book, right? So, but how do you do it in high school? I feel like sometimes high school teachers are, like this is for bait, but it's not. Like I feel like there's so much depth, but anything that you've seen or ideas that you have, I'd love to bring that to high school teachers as well.
I'll say that when I've done it with, oh, sorry, go ahead, Luz, and then I'll share. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I'll just say every time we do a workshop with teachers anywhere, we remind them that picture books are for every grade level, because they do engage in some really meaningful topics in a way that is just so multi-layered sometimes, I mean, if you are intentional about your book choice, right? And so it's just a really great way to explore topics in a way that won't take weeks, right? It can be done in a reading. So that's really important to sort of just, if you have like a period or something like that, to explore something. But that's just a really great targeted way to do that. But go ahead, Carla.
No, I was just thinking of having the picture books be a mentor text for they're saying you're going to contribute to our local library, you're going to contribute to the school down the block, right? Because you're a high school, but you all came from this K-8 school or this middle school. And because it's so powerful when you say your reading informs your writing, which it does, but then who's our audience? And what if we were writing stories that could contribute to our local libraries, right? So I've been working a lot with 8th graders and 7th and 8th graders this year on saying, what you create, we're sharing that as with our school library. We're sharing that with our the previous grade. So when you came, what did you wish you were like a book you wish existed in the world, right? That was like Toni Morrison. If you can create it, so whether it's short stories, whether it's, a book I modeled after a picture book, I love that they can see themselves because they are writers. And I want you to stop seeing yourself as a writer for a bulletin board, or a writer for a grade, or a writer because it goes into a teacher's portfolio. A writer has many different reasons why we write. And I want you to see that you can share it with the 5th grade down the block. You can share it with the local library. And so I think, and then they see like the different types of purpose, right, for writing. So I would love to see more of those partnerships between high schools and middle schools, high schools and elementary schools, high schools and local libraries.
When I worked in pre-K through, for a while, we actually had middle school and high school kids, and we did exactly that, Carla. It was like the older kids, it was like reading children's literature and then writing stories and illustrating them, or partnering up with somebody who felt more confident about even though everybody is an artist, like working together in collaboration and creating picture books and children's books to read with the younger children, not just to put on a shelf somewhere. It's really powerful when it has meaning, and it's rooted in community, school community, neighborhood community, culture, all the things. I also, in thinking, it's funny that you brought up nursery rhymes, because I was actually out in a school with Shayla recently, and the nursery rhymes are in this, what's it called? Haggerty? They're in this phonics, this phonics Haggerty, right? Nursery rhymes are in this phonics based program that the DOE or the DECE, Division of Early Childhood, has recently, I don't know how recently, you guys would know better than me, Shayla and Omatola, but and it's interesting because the teachers were talking about how the kids like them. At the same time, they're so, if you actually look at the words in some of those nursery rhymes, how disconnected they are from the children's lives. And then I also think about, especially as a white woman, being thoughtful about, like, as an educator, and thinking about rap and hip hop and the whole move towards hip hop education, and and Chris Emden's work and Jamila Lyscott and all of these folks doing incredible work. But and even back in 1990, whatever, Gloria Ladson-Billings was writing about it, right? We can't just use it because we think it matches. Again, it's what you said, Kahdeidra. It's like we have to start on the micro level of what are these particular kids in this particular community truly engaged in, and that's where we go. Not based on and I don't mean to contradict you, Dr. Shanley. I just was thinking about the complexities of culturally sustaining work, and making sure that we're not just putting something onto our pedagogies and curricula because of an assumption we're making, so, and especially when I'm bringing my own whiteness to the work as well. So I just wanted to throw that in. Other questions or thoughts?
Yeah, and
Parents, go ahead.
Oh.
Go ahead, Lisa.
No, go ahead.
I think parents are our best resource, right? In many ways. And I think we need to think also of sort of chants and nursery rhymes that the kids are hearing now. One of my student teachers who's working with 4-year-olds asked them if they knew a particular song that she had heard about. And it's a song that it's very popular among the 4-year-olds and that we have no idea it's happening. So I think that they're also sort of asking what is happening in their lived worlds. When she sings that song and they do the body movements, everybody participates, everybody joins. So I think that we also need to think in that sense that we're bringing them both knowledge from the parents, knowledge from popular culture, and knowledge from our own. We're sharing all of that.
Thank you for that, Cecilia. We might have time for one more question. I just wanted to add, Tatiana, to your question. I added just a quick search list, and this one just has 10, but I'm sure if I keep searching, I'll find, you want to actually look at I scanned the titles of the books because some of the book lists that they put together for high schoolers are just like books that you're like, maybe not. But children's books have become so much more sophisticated, and they cover such a wide range of topics. I mean, one of the earliest ones, or picture books rather, and the Missing Piece, right? Talking about, self-love and these things. So I think you can definitely find books that can cover such a wide range of sophisticated topics and that are beautifully illustrated and that are culturally diverse to introduce to your high school students. And I know the history curriculum, Teaching American History, they would have some units where they would include children's books to start the history unit with, or picture books to, that talk about World War II or, big topics for middle schoolers and high schoolers. So those could be some resources. But if anybody, we have time for maybe one more quick question. And then if not, then we'll close out so we can end on time. Go ahead, Deb.
Sorry, I want to go back to also, we talked about language, et cetera, et cetera. And I was thinking just recently when I picked up the Born on the Water, how beautiful it was. It had the poetry, had the language piece, but also the power of illustrations. So when someone was talking about our children seeing themselves, that the power in a lot of the books that I've been surrounding myself with, trying to introduce ideas, is also the power that the illustration, the illustrator brings to the story as well. I just was thinking about that and thinking about my high school kids when I was teaching back in Crown Heights, when you were trying to introduce an idea and they couldn't conceptualize what it looked like. That's why I said it previously in the chat that context matters. So if you can't create it in your class, can the illustrator in the book that you choose create it for you, with you, so you can get that excitement, that passion and everything going? So I was wondering how people felt about that, especially, when we're thinking about the banned books. When I look at the list, I'm like, some of these books, to me were critical. Anyway, I don't want to go there. It's too deep for me right now. It's too emotional.
Definitely check out that New York Public Library link I threw in there.
Yeah, thank you.
For sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm currently the other memoir, because I love memoirs, that I'm reading is one of the books on that list. So it's George M. Johnson's All Boys Aren't Blue. It's memoir. So that's yeah.
Yeah, it's powerful too, because I don't know if it's true of all of the books that they're putting up there, but some of them, at least the first one, I don't know, maybe they're going to keep doing it over time. they're making it available on ebook, like unlimited numbers. Of course, access is everything, and who has a device and who doesn't, and who has the knowledge to. And in any case, check out Tatiana. We love you. Check out the that link, because it's good. You mean like even Stamped is on there. You know, it's just like you know, it's like it's anyway. So
with that, we've come to time. We've come to time, which makes us always very sad, because we never want to say goodbye to our wonderful panelists. But I do want to say thank you for sharing your wisdom, your experience, your thoughts. I'm leaving this panel just knowing a lot more, and I'm already thinking of like how we're going to bring you back next year, because I think we need to do this one again and have more and more people just hear your wonderful thoughts on how to engage our young people and our families in reading and loving reading in a way that decenters whiteness and really is sustaining and is allowing us to have children become more critical readers and not just functionaries, right? I forget the term that Cecilia used, letrado versus alfabetización, alfabetizados, right? So thank you everyone for joining us again. A round of applause for our panelists. Thank you.
Woo, woo, woo. Yeah, come off mute. Thank you.
Yes.
Brilliant.
And, I hope you all have a wonderful summer, have a wonderful reading summer. And we look forward to having you back next fall for the next round of Praxis conversations.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you, Lizette.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Alisa. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So great.
Bye,
to see you
Tom.
all.
Bye, Shayla.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.